Make sure you look at me.
Oh, okay.
So, 10 minutes, I'll go off and then finish up with the next couple.
Greetings all, and today my presentation will be over the book Nothing to Envy by Barbara Demme. So we'll first start off with my thesis so we can grab a better understanding of what my presentation shall be over. And my thesis for this presentation is how the book Nothing to Envy portrays how the people are forced to change, and it shows how an average and loyal North Korean has changed when times get tough. One of the characters from the book is named Oki, and she is a great example of this because she leaves the country and then later on flees to China, then later South Korea. This right here shows a great representation of how North Korea was highly looked on by its people and then later on fall into the cracks of the world, begging to get out. So, you may be wondering, like, how does it feel to be a North Korean? Well, I will answer that for you right now. Imagine your whole life you've been born into this country where you hear how great the great leader is, hence why they call it the great leader. And you don't hear any otherwise because all the people within it have heard the same thing because they never got influences from the outside and they're never able to go outside. But you may wonder, it sounds like a really bad deal, but they get a little bit perks from it. Let's say you get 3 free pictures. Everyone gets one. 3. And those 3 pictures are the self-portraits of the beloved leader. And what's so great about this is because it has 24/7 surveillance access to everywhere you go. They'll be watching you when you're at home, at school, at business, or even when you're in the bathroom. They will always be watching you because that is how it feels to be in North Korea. So now, since you have a better understanding of what it's like to be in North Korea, or from a perspective of a North Korean, let's dive into my quote. This quote stood out to me throughout the book, and the quote is, "What bitches we've become, the hunger has turned us so wicked," on page 231. As you can see, I underlined it 3 words that I will fully dive into so we can grasp a better understanding of how the people changed over time. And the words were bitches, weave, and wicked. Mr. Painter, can you pause the time now while I set up for the second part?
Yeah.
How do I turn it off? This button?
Yeah.
Press it again.
Twice.
Okay.
And mics.
Yeah. So, the first word I'll start with is bitch, or bitches, but I just shortened it to bitch. We'll show a very great change of Oki, the character from the book. Bitch can be defined as female dog or overbearing woman. So we'll start with female dog. Female dog is like a female dog in North Korea, and they're technically classified as pets, and those pets are usually hungry. So those together makes them a hungry pet in North Korea. Hence, North Korea is their owner. So let's jump over to overbearing woman. I took the word bear from overbearing and the word woman from woman and got girl bear. And girl bear tends to love to get married to man bears, which makes them the pet again, but to a man this time. And what do girl bears tend to do? Have kids. And that's what Oki does. And then later on she develops to have family problems from an abusive husband because her husband would always beat her whenever things didn't go her way. And then her starving relatives was another problem because her husband didn't want to feed her anything and her family. And her only option was to leave, so she did. And that's what a pet would do when they're hungry. Or if you don't, you just die. Her options were to find a new owner or scavenge by yourself. And scavenging by yourself, which meant going to a new place, which meant going to China. Or finding a new owner, which meant marrying a new man. So she does both, which she marries a man in China. But even though she left, her animal instincts kicked in, knowing she needs to make money and save kids. After marrying a man in China, she gets food and a job, which survives and makes money. And that's what her animal instincts told her to do. So, after she developed all that money and survived, she returns, but to get caught by her previous owner, North Korea. And owners tend to punish their pets, and that's what she got. And she starts to see other pets get the same punishment, and then she understands what kind of person she is. A bad mother bear. Because a bad mother bear in today's society is nothing. Because a mother must be nurturing and set a good example for their kids. The next word I chose was weave. Weave will show a representation of the country as a whole. So weave, you can first start off, it's a contraction word of we and have that's combined together, unlike North Korea and South Korea. Am I right? You can define we as you and a group of people, and in this case, it can form a country, and we're talking about North Korea. As for had, I tend to use the past tense had, and a popular term you would use for had is had enough. So when you and a group of people had enough, the sentence would be, we had enough. And then when you and a group of people had enough, it's usually because you're frustrated and tired. Frustration can be a type of another emotion, can be defined as angry and unhappy, which is a type of emotion you can have in North Korea. But in North Korea, you tend to only have two emotions, which is you're happy and sad. You're happy that your leader's alive, or you're sad because your leader is dead. Now, frustration, and when you had enough, and since you're tired, it can be defined as sleepy or a car tired. Tired. Unhappy and sleepy goes hand in hand. It goes in any scenario where like you're sleepy from working so hard, and then you're unhappy because you don't get enough food. That's what happens to most people in North Korea. Now, for tired, it would define as sleepy and car tired. So I just broke down car tire as car because that's where it would go on to. And cars tend to have 4 wheels. And for car, well, if they're not getting enough food, they won't even get a car. For 4 wheels, I took the number 4, and that forms up the basic human life cycle, which is you're born, you go to school, you work, you die. But in North Korea, you only have technically 2 life cycles, which is being born and then you just die. And so that makes up 2 cycles, and then if you look at 2 cycles, it's almost like bicycle, because the prefix bi translates to 2. So I put the 2 and then cycle again, and then I spelled out 2, you get TWO, and a synonym for 2 is to, like to go. Now my last word was wicked, and this shall show the relationship of Mrs. Song and Oki of how they changed together. First, wicked can be defined as evil and malicious. So we'll start with evil. Evil can be defined as bad, which in North Korea, bad is defined as North America and South America. So when you're calling someone bad in North Korea, you're as bad as a North American and South Korean. For malicious, if you take the prefix mal, or malo in Spanish, which is defined as bad, and then if you take the suffix ishes, you get contagious. So those together makes bad is very contagious. And what else is almost contagious? A disease. Like Mrs. Song's son, who had one and died because she let it happen, which make her as bad as a North American and South Korean. As Oki, well, she knew she was as bad as a North American and South Korean, so she chooses to accept it. But Miss Song denies it, which let her go into sorrow, fall into depression. Then she's left to die. And then her daughter comes and saves her. And then she starts to spread out the idea of how great life outside North Korea is. So that shows how bad is very contagious. And Oki accepts her badness and defects to China, and then later to South Korea. And then she comes back and spreads the idea again to Mrs. Song, which she goes to China and then later to South Korea. And then after a couple of years after she's transformed into the South Korean culture, she starts to envy how her husband isn't here. Yes. Where did I put that? Oh. There it is. Alright, now we'll move.
I gotta end it and then start it again.
Okay.
I think this is gonna be the next. Are you on the analyze
Yep.
or are you gonna go to this one next?
Yeah, I'm gonna go to that one.
Okay.
So my first quote that relates to bitches, which is the quote, when a woman in Johnle mysteriously disappeared, people would whisper, that whore probably sold herself to the Chinese, on page 225. This quote is a great example of how in North Korea they are considered as pets. Because in this case the owner was the great leader, and then but the great leader died, which was Kim Il Sung. So, and a pet's only choice are left to stand around and then wait for death. Or they can go out, scavenge for themselves, and live on their own. But in this case, Oki decided to wait at an animal shelter, waiting for a new owner to pass by and pick her up and take her home. The next quote is the weave quote. Everybody who's going to die was already dead, on page 146. Like in my diagram for weave, there was only 2 life cycles, which was being born and then you die. So this shows the 2 life cycles of, and it's saying that they were born into death, because in North Korea, your chances of surviving was slim to nothing. And then for the wicked quotes, her eyes would miss and her round face would soften when she spoke of her late husband, on page 250. This was after Mrs. Song was fully immersed into the South Korean culture, and she starts to realize how she would regret what kind of person she was back then in North Korea, and how wicked she was for following the system, which cost her her husband, her son, and almost her life. So, to conclude on this presentation, we learned that bitches we wicked is another way of saying nothing to envy. And also that the book showed the life of a North Korean and how they changed they changed due to a collapsing paradise because they thought North Korea was the paradise of the world. And but then they start to think otherwise, because over time, no matter how much you like something, you start to get bored and tired of it, and that's what happened to them. They decided to forget their pride of being a self-sufficient country and thinking they're the superior race, and traded all in for help. But those who didn't trade it in for help, denied it, and then died as a loyal North Korean. But everyone knows, being loyal to something dead, in this case the great leader, won't bring them back to life. Those were my works cited page, and this was a cool picture I found.
You're my hero, John.
Woo! Thank you, John.
It won't focus on the picture.
How long did I go?
12 minutes.
Oh, yeah. That's how much I'm
Oh my God.
Hey,